File 1A. Listening. 1.
Well, one job I've always thought I'd like is being a travel writer. I mean, basically, I like traveling, and I like the idea of going around the world, and I'd like to have an excuse to do it and be paid for it if possible. I think I'd be pretty good at it because, well, I'm a sociable guy, and I like to think I can write, and I don't mind living out of a suitcase and living cheaply. And it just seems like it would be a great way to see the world. I mean, I don't actually know anybody who does it, but I've always sort of envied people like Anthony Bourdain who get to go around the world and do these TV shows. They always seem to be having a lot of fun. But I do occasionally read travel books, and while some of them are fantastic, with others, you definitely get the impression that the authors were sent there by their publisher to write about Patagonia or whatever, and nothing much happened, but they still have to finish the book. So you get kind of a slow, boring book sometimes. And I guess that might be a drawback if you feel like you have to write a book, even if you don't have anything to say.
2.
Well, what I'd really hate to do is any kind of job on a factory production line, any really menial kind of thing, where there's really no, mental input at all, but you're just repeating the same task over and over again. I think that would probably drive me insane. I did something kind of like that when I was about 18. I worked in a plastic factory to make some money for a couple of months, and I remember I went in the morning when it was still dark, and when I got out, it was dark because it was winter, so I never saw the light of day. It was about a 10-hour day, and I was paid next to nothing. We had half an hour for lunch, and the noise of the machines was so loud that you could shout at the top of your lungs, and the person next to you couldn't hear you. And the smell of plastics filled the air, and it was completely disgusting. The only advantage was that it was so loud that you could actually sing at the top of your lungs and nobody could hear you. So I spent a lot of my day singing to myself, which was fun.
File 1A. Pronunciation B. 1.
Manager. Employee. Salary.
2. Career. Unpaid. Training. 3.
Promote. Wages. Business.
4. Tedious. Profession. Rewarding. 5.
Demanding. Employer. Turnover.
6. Motivating. Monotonous. Responsible. File 1B. Listening. 1.
Speaking from my own personal experience, I love the fact that I have a brother. We had a lot of fun when we were growing up, and now having 2 kids myself, I'm really glad that they can look out for each other. And I think as you go through life and your own parents get older, and you'll have to take care of them someday, I think doing that with a sibling would be a lot easier.
2.
I'm an only child, and someone once said to me, "Oh, it must be so much better to be an only child because you get all your parents' attention and you don't have to share it with your brothers and sisters." And to an extent, I kind of agree because it is great to have all that attention from your parents. But you can end up becoming sort of spoiled and used to having all that attention. So when you have to go to school or you have to interact with other people, if you don't get the attention you're used to, you can react in a really negative way without really meaning to.
3.
I have 2 kids, and although they fight all the time and they, can get kind of rough with each other, when they are fighting, I try to look at the positives of it and think, I guess it's a good thing that they're, learning to do all those things in a safe family environment, which I guess if you are an only child, maybe then it has to be at school or it's like practicing.
4.
I would have hated being an only child. I had 3 brothers and sisters, and the girl next door was an only child, and she was under so much pressure from her parents to succeed, and all their hopes were focused on this one girl. I thought I wouldn't want all that pressure on me.
File 1B. Pronunciation B.
Heir, parent, wear, earring,
Serious. Employer. Maternity.
comfort, close, bonus,
Ow. Throughout. Hours. Tedious.
or, hurt, security, furious,
Rewarding. Demanding. Staff.
awe, prospects, promoted, contract,
Ear. Career. Experience. Anywhere.
File 2A. Listening. 1.
I decided a few years ago that I wanted to take French lessons. I studied French in high school, but that was years ago, and you know what it's like to study something because you have to, rather than because you want to. Anyway, I signed up for a 10-week evening class. It was on Monday nights for an hour and a half. At the end of the course, I realized that I hadn't really learned much. I was just too tired at the end of the day to sit in a classroom and take in what the teacher was saying. Also, once a week isn't really enough in my opinion. Then, I got the opportunity to go to Paris on business for 6 months. As you can imagine, I was so excited. I was totally immersed in the language there. I had to speak French every day, everywhere, to everyone. It was amazing. Now that I'm back in the U.S., I'm taking another class, an advanced one, but this one is twice a week. I also try to get together with some of my classmates over the weekend, and some of us are even going to organize a trip to Quebec City in Canada for a weekend.
2.
I love languages. I think it might be because I love traveling, and I think it makes a real difference to your trip if you can speak the language of the place you're visiting. Well, obviously, some languages are more difficult than others, and you don't always have time to take lessons before going somewhere. But you can always learn a few words and phrases. It makes a huge difference. People tend to be much more friendly and helpful if they can tell that you at least made an effort. I think the minimum you need to learn to get around is greetings, numbers, and thank you. It also helps if you know how to say, I don't understand, and I'm from wherever you're from. I did this when I went to Korea for the World Cup in 2002. I realized that I liked the sound of Korean and decided to take lessons when I got back to the U.S. It wasn't easy finding a teacher, but I did. Now I've been back to Korea every year since 2002 to practice what I've learned. It's a beautiful country, and the people are so pleasantly surprised when they hear me speak. I've been invited to people's houses, taken out for meals, been given discounts in shops. I love it and would recommend it to everyone.
File 2A, pronunciation B.
E. Sheep. Team.
A. Handful. Half.
Or. Formal. Rewarding.
E. Profession. Spread.
A. Great. Training.
I. Fired.
I. Business. Distant.
A. Couple. Conduct.
File 2B, listening. 1,
I remember idyllic childhood vacations with my family, going to places like the Grand Canyon and Yosemite Park. The trip there was always horrible because I used to get really carsick, and my parents would make me keep a bucket in the back seat. If I did get sick, it was a really bad start to the vacation. But when we got there, it always seemed like the sun was shining and I was ready for an adventure. Now we can look back on these memories because my dad had an 8mm camera. Those were around way before video was invented. And he's got these like 7-minute home movies of all of our vacations, and it's just like being back there. We used to love setting up the projector and watching the footage of our trips when we got back.
2. When I was a kid, we always used to go on vacation up in Vermont in New England, where my grandma had a farm. And it was great because she had 13 cows that all had names, and we used to milk them, and it was wonderful. And, all my cousins used to descend on the same place, so we were like sort of a crew of kids. And we used to go to the beach and swim in the pond and play on the farm. It was great. And there were tons of crows there. I remember they used to wake me up every morning, and the sound of those crows made me sort of emotional. Whenever I heard crows when I was at school, I used to cry because I would think about my vacations at my grandma's. And I still go down there now, which is really nice. File 2B, pronunciation B. 1,
Neighborhood.
2,
Competition.
3,
Partnership.
4,
Happiness.
5,
Celebration.
6,
Relationship.
7,
Imagination.
8,
Belief.
9.
Boredom.
File 3A, listening.
Todd was my high school boyfriend. It was love at first sight, and we were really close. But then he joined the Army in 1986 and went to serve overseas. We wrote to each other every day at first, but then somehow a rumor got started that I was dating other people. It wasn't true at all, by the way, but Todd heard about it and decided to break off our relationship. I was devastated, but I eventually realized I had to move on. I got engaged to someone else, even though deep down I was still pining for Todd. Well, 10 years later, my marriage was a mess, so I decided to go home and stay with my parents to try and get away from it all. I kept thinking about Todd, and I had this strange feeling that something bad had happened to him. So I Googled him and found his phone number, and I called him and left a message. 2 days later, he called back. It turned out he'd been looking for me, too, on the internet, but couldn't find any information about me, so he gave up. Anyway, we talked on the phone for hours, and to make a long story short, the next morning he got on a plane, and I picked him up at the airport, the same one I'd taken him to when he left for the Army 11 years earlier. We've been together ever since, and we live in Seattle. We've got 2 great kids. I love telling this story, you know. Every time I tell it, I cry.
File 3A, Pronunciation B. 1,
Ballet.
2,
Rendezvous.
3,
Faux pas.
4,
Déjà vu.
5,
Entrepreneur.
6,
Cliché.
File 3B, Listening. 1,
A movie I saw fairly recently is Gandhi. It's set in India. It starts in about the 1890s and moves into about 1915 and beyond. It's the true story of one man's life and his principles and his ultimate power to lead a country to freedom, and in doing so, facing prejudice and hatred towards himself and his fellow Indians. My favorite scenes are, well, there's one early on in the movie when he addresses his fellow Indians in South Africa, and he gives a really powerful speech, and his message is about them standing up and facing the prejudice head on, but always completely peacefully, never using any violence. It's just a really powerful scene.
2. I watched Lincoln on a recent flight I was on. The movie is set in the U.S. during the mid-1800s, and that was when the Civil War was going on. It's the true story of Abraham Lincoln's presidency and his principles and how he used his political power to end slavery in America forever. I think the movie showed what a political genius Lincoln was. I never knew he had intentionally prolonged the Civil War so that the pro-slavery Southern states wouldn't be able to vote to keep slavery during that time. I especially enjoyed the scenes of Lincoln with his wife Mary. She's played by Sally Field, who's one of my favorite actors. File 3B, Pronunciation B. 1,
Survivor. Survival.
2,
Civil. Civilian.
3,
History. Historical.
4,
Withdraw. Withdrawal.
5,
Rebel. Rebel.
6,
Captive. Capture.
7,
Execute. Execution.
8,
Victory. Victorious.
9,
Looting. Looter.
10,
Rebel. Rebellion.
File 4A, Listening.
Today's featured musicians are a group of young people from Brazil. The group and its maestro, Fabio Bonvenuto, gained international recognition when they were asked to play along with other world-renowned musicians at the 2014 World Cup opening ceremonies. They're called the Music of Silence Band, and what makes them special, aside from their musical talents, is that some of the members are deaf. Bonvenuto developed his method of teaching deaf students working as a band conductor and music teacher at a public school in a poor Sao Paulo neighborhood. The deaf students learned to play percussion by feeling the vibrations of the rhythm, as opposed to through sound waves, the way hearing people do. Bonvenuto is, himself, able to hear and is still working on his sign language, but the music fills any gaps in communication that may arise between him and his deaf students. He explains that studies have shown that deaf people use the same part of the brain to process music through vibration as hearing people do, and that rhythm provides the deaf with the same type of enjoyment experienced by hearing people, even though they can't feel every note. Bonvenuto said the deaf students benefited in other ways too. He says that early in the program, he began to notice a change in all the students. The deaf and hearing students started to interact more with one another on a social level. They learned the value of teamwork, and everyone had something to offer the group. As Bonvenuto says, that's just what happens in a band. It takes everyone to make the music sound good. He says the positive effects have reached beyond just the students themselves. Parents and family members of the deaf band members have been sending a steady stream of thanks to Bonvenuto for including their children in an activity that helps them make friends and build confidence. Now that the world has seen what they can do, look for Bonvenuto and the Music of Silence Band to continue sharing their hard work and inspiring spirit across the globe in the years to come.
File 4A, Pronunciation B. 1,
Screech.
2,
Prospect.
3,
Kindness.
4,
Employee.
5,
Challenging.
6,
Splash.
7,
Stepsister.
8,
Spread.
9,
Grandparent.
10.
Impression.
File 4B, Listening.
I remember one book I had to read in school that I really hated was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I could not get into it at all. I mean, I have seen the movies, the later ones of Lord of the Rings, and I think they are really well made, and as a kid, I would have probably gotten into those. But reading The Hobbit in class at 12 years old, it just left me completely cold. Was there one that had that effect on you?
Yes, for me it was Moby Dick by Herman Melville. So boring I can't even remember much about it. I guess I don't really go for classic literature, but the book was just incredibly dry and taught in such a boring way. And we had to read aloud in class.
Yes.
Sometimes it seemed like even the teacher couldn't wait to get through the book.
I know.
Some stuff we had to read was just really dull. We didn't have any connection to it, you know?
Right. And just because it's the kind of stuff that makes a good movie, it doesn't mean it would be interesting for kids to read in class.
No, absolutely not. File 4B, Pronunciation B. 1,
Business.
2,
Chocolate.
3,
Several.
4,
Restaurant.
5,
Temperature.
6,
Preference.
7,
Average.
8,
Laboratory.
File 5A. Listening. 1.
How good are you at multitasking?
I used to be better at it, I think, before I had children. I just think my brain's not as good as it used to be, but with minor things, I'm still pretty good. I'm good at judging how long things take, so I can load the washing machine while the computer is booting up. I know that if I have to call the bank or the insurance company or something, I'll be on hold forever, so I make sure I have something to do while I'm waiting. I guess it's harder when there's an emotional need, especially with the kids. Like, last night I was making dinner, and my daughter was in the kitchen and she said, "Can you play with me?" And because all I had to do was stir the saucepan every couple of minutes, we started playing a game of cards. The problem was that she got really frustrated because I had to keep interrupting the game to stir the pan. So I realize now that it was a mistake to try to play a game without being able to give it 100% of my attention. I guess the computer might be happy to wait quietly while I finish loading the washing machine, but my 6-year-old isn't quite as patient.
2.
How good are you at multitasking?
Part of me thinks I'm really good at it, that I can do a bunch of things at once. I think that part of my brain is able to figure out problems while I'm concentrating on something else, so that when I go back to them, they're much easier than they were before. But if I'm honest with myself, I'm starting to realize that I can take on too much at once. I think I get a lot of things done, but I also leave a lot unfinished. I mean, there are home projects that I started literally months ago. Just as one example, I drilled a hole in the wall to hang up a painting, but before I could put the screw in and actually hang the picture, something came up. Then another thing came up. Long story short, the painting is still on the floor leaning against the wall, under the hole. And to be honest, I could think of similar examples in all aspects of my life. I definitely spend too much of the day asking myself, now, what was I doing?
File 5A. Pronunciation B. 1.
Oliver's asking for some extra time off.
2.
My cousin Nick is never on time.
3.
I find that doing housework takes up a lot of time.
4.
We walked to town since we had plenty of time.
5.
We seem to have run out of time.
6.
It's only a matter of time before the sports arena opens.
File 5B. Listening.
This evening, someone, somewhere, could discover that they have won a $25 million lottery jackpot. At some point, they will need professional help in dealing with all this money. Tina Williams is a wealth counselor who specializes in giving advice to lottery winners. Tina, how do people usually react when they find out that they won so much money?
People react in very different ways. Sometimes they dance. Often there are tears. I usually join in because you can't help but get sucked into their roller coaster of emotions.
What kinds of decisions do the winners have to make?
Well, the first thing they have to decide is whether to go public. Then comes a host of other questions. Whether to stop working, buy a mansion somewhere, give the money away, build a swimming pool, or look for a new partner. The first piece of advice we give is not to rush into anything they may regret later.
Roughly, how many people keep their jobs after winning?
Fewer than a third of all jackpot millionaires still work, but some who give up their careers can end up feeling useless and guilty.
Does winning the lottery tend to have a positive or negative effect on a couple's relationship?
Well, according to a study by the University of Kentucky, winning the lottery does not significantly affect divorce rates for married couples.
So what kind of help do you offer for winners?
Well, we send in a financial expert, a lawyer, and a member of our team. These people provide help with banking, investment, inheritance taxes, and estate planning.
Do you ever feel envious of the winners?
Not really. Many of them really do deserve it. I remember one man who won just as his house was about to be repossessed by the bank because he had gotten behind with his mortgage payments.
Oh.
Then there's the couple who won about 10 years ago and since then have given away about 2/3 of their money to charity.
Tina, do you ever play the lottery yourself?
Actually, I'm banned from playing in this country because of my job, but I sometimes buy a ticket when I'm traveling abroad.
Tina Williams, thanks for talking to us.
My pleasure.
File 5B, Pronunciation B. 1,
Break. Great. Cheat. Steak.
2,
Sweat. Scream. Cheap. Peak.
3,
Spread. Leave. Measure. Heavy.
4,
Beard. Clear. Swear. Near.
5,
Early. Heard. Hear. Earth.
6,
Bear. Deer. Where. Pear.
File 6A, Listening. 1,
Who's that one? Gina Ford?
she's very strict.
Very strict, very strict. Everything's scheduled. Wake up the baby at this time, feed him at certain times.
Potty train your child in a week?
Yeah, on the potty every 10 minutes, off again, on again. I don't know. It all seems very controlled. Then there's another one. What's that one? It's 3 in a bed or something. That's the complete opposite. It's kind of a more hippie approach, you know? Keep all the kids in bed with you, just feed whenever. I mean, the trouble with these things is they all say different things, don't they?
2,
I did. Well, I read half of it, and I stuck to the diet for 4 days and was suffering from such severe headaches that I couldn't do it anymore. And my wife and I, we did it together, and we went out to dinner one night and did fine. On the way home, we walked past a bakery and saw some cupcakes in the window.
Which is carbohydrates, which is the last thing you're supposed to have.
And we bought a half a dozen to take home, and that was that.
3,
My shower broke, and yeah, I found a website and it showed me how to fix it. It was pretty good.
Actually saved yourself a call to a plumber and everything?
Absolutely. I did have to call a helpline because there was one part I didn't understand. I made, they told me what parts to get.
Wow.
Yeah, I did it myself.
How much did it cost you to do your shower?
$50, as opposed to hiring, paying.
Calling someone?
Yeah, and charging 3 times that. So, yeah.
That was really smart.
File 6A, Pronunciation B. D. Enabled. Imagined. Encouraged. Involved. Ordered.
Disliked. Forced. Helped. Risked. Stopped.
Id. Persuaded. Prevented. Recommended. reminded, expected. File 6B, listening. 1.
Yes, my wife is pretty obsessed with keeping things neat. Particularly if anybody is coming to stay, she has to clean. Not only to stay, to dinner, or someone is coming to. If a carpenter is coming to fix some shelves, she has to clean the house from top to bottom in case he uses the bathroom or in case he looks inside the closet, And it gets to the stage where, you can't invite anybody over because it's such a big deal because the whole house has to be cleaned from top to bottom.
2.
In the past couple of years, my brother has become a real fitness freak, Like when we were kids, he was always a little overweight. He used to think he was kind of a nerd because he had, he used to wear glasses and, from a very young age. And I think he's always had a little bit of a complex about the way he looked. But now that he's gotten into his late 20s, he's kind of grown into himself a little more. And he's really trying to stay in shape. He's at the gym pretty much every day. He bikes everywhere. He goes on cycling vacations. Unlike 10 years ago when he was such a couch potato, eating chips and watching TV, he's really transformed himself.
File 6B, pronunciation B.
Sh. Pressure. Arrangement. Anxious. Technician.
Ch. Century. Message. Switched. Future.
Sh. Addiction. Obsession. Crucial. Conclusion.
Zh. Condition. Decision. Pleasure. Occasion.
J. Journalist. Gambling. Marriage. Surgery.
File 7A, listening.
Oh, look at this article. That's ridiculous.
What is?
They're trying to ban Boy Scouts from carrying penknives.
What's wrong with that?
Well, Scouts have always carried penknives, haven't they? They're an essential part of their kit. How are they going to prepare food or carve tools without them?
Well, I think too many young people carry knives these days. I read the other day that knife crime has risen by over 50% in the past year, and it's time somebody did something about it.
I agree that something should be done about knife crime, but Scouts aren't really into that, are they?
How do you know? If there's bullying and intimidation among kids at school, it might happen at Scout meetings too.
I'm sure the leaders know the boys in their troop, and they'd be keeping an eye on any troublemakers. Anyway, banning knives completely undermines one of the main goals of the Scouts.
What do you mean?
Well, the first Boy Scout law says that a Scout should be trusted. So surely they can be trusted enough to carry and use a penknife safely.
Well, maybe if the leaders kept the knives and handed them out only when they're needed by the Scouts?
That just complicates things. Scouts have always carried a knife on their belt. Anyway, in my opinion, if you teach young people to respect knives, they will value them as a tool. If you treat knives as dangerous implements, the Scouts may never feel comfortable with them at all.
Is it actually legal to carry any kind of knife these days?
I'm not sure. No, wait a minute. It says here that it's legal for anyone to carry a foldable, non-locking knife as long as it's shorter than 4 inches.
Really? In that case, I don't see the problem. If it's not against the law to carry a penknife, then I really don't think the Boy Scouts should ban them.
File 7A, pronunciation B. 1.
Antivirus.
2.
Outlawed.
3.
Overcharged.
4.
Pro-socially.
5,
Prearranged.
6,
Demotivated.
7,
Rewritten.
8,
Misrepresented.
9,
Underestimated.
File 7B. Listening. Some simply see it as an eyesore, but for others, graffiti is as valuable as a Renaissance painting. For 11 years, graffiti, or aerosol art as it's often called, was given serious prominence as an art form in Long Island City, New York. From 2002 to 2013, the neighborhood was home to the 5 Points Aerosol Art Center, a 200,000 square foot factory turned outdoor exhibit space dedicated to graffiti by artists from across the globe. Well-known aerosol artists from Japan, Brazil, Canada, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and all over the U.S. journeyed to 5 Points to work in its private indoor studios and spray their kaleidoscopic works outside on the brick walls around the industrial complex. The result was a visually stunning city block of giant murals representing an astounding array of graffiti art styles, from realistic portraits of people to monsters and mythical creatures to huge words like charm and stellar in stylized script. 5 Points founder and former curator of the outdoor gallery is spray can veteran Jonathan Cohen. For years, Cohen had been looking to the future and planning to use the space to open a school for aspiring aerosol artists. However, in late 2013, the New York City Planning Commission approved a plan to tear down the 5 Points complex and build luxury apartments in its place. The owner of the complex, David Wolkoff, proposed the new development, calling the apartments an exciting project for the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Long Island City business owners mourn the loss of a unique attraction that brings tens of thousands of visitors to the area annually. Mark Levy, a local tour company owner, said, "We are unhappy to lose such a landmark, especially a place that's so welcoming to artists." Soon after the vote was announced, a group of 17 artists whose work adorned the buildings took legal action against Wolkoff, claiming that their artwork was protected under the law. However, after some early victories in court that delayed demolition of the complex, a federal judge finally rejected the artist's suit. In the early hours of November 19, 2013, a team of painters hired by Wolkoff whitewashed the entire complex, erasing 11 years of artwork and finally marking the end of a unique and beloved New York art haven. File 7B. Pronunciation B. 1,
We're going to stay in a tent, not a cabin.
2,
I didn't choose the hotel. My boyfriend did.
3,
I ordered beef, not pork.
4,
My husband can drive, but he won't drive.
5,
I'll wash your shirt, but I'm not ironing it.
6,
They don't live inland. They live on the coast.
7,
Helen can't speak French, but she can write it.
8,
I'm not doing the dishes. You are.
File 8A. Listening.
Is it true that eating chocolate can give you pimples?
Doctors believe that chocolate could give you acne right up until a few years ago. but more recent research has shown that this is not, in fact, the case.
Oh.
The only foods that seem to have a bad effect on the skin are some dairy products. For example, skimmed milk, as well as shellfish and soy sauce.
Generations of parents have told their children to sit up straight. And to be honest, it drives me crazy to see children slouching in their chairs. But does it really do any damage?
Well, the thing to realize is that sitting with your shoulders back and your back straight isn't actually a natural sitting position. That's why it's so hard to maintain and why children are so reluctant to do it.
Oh.
The latest research shows that sitting with a straight back can, in fact, cause lower back pain. The best position for your back is one where you're reclining at an angle of 135 degrees. In other words, more or less as if you were sitting in a lounge chair by the swimming pool. Okay, you can't sit in a lounge chair all day, or at least most of us can't. But the important thing when you're working is to try to lean back slightly rather than sitting up straight.
Okay, a last one. Are carrots good for eyesight? I mean, you never see a rabbit wearing glasses.
Very true. Well, this belief seems to have originated during World War II.
Really?
British intelligence didn't want the enemy to know that they were using radar to detect enemy bombers, so they spread the rumor that they were feeding their pilots carrots in order to improve their eyesight. The trouble is the campaign was so successful, people still believe it even today. But, in fact, there is some truth in this because carrots do contain a high concentration of vitamin A, which is important for healthy eyesight. But an extra helping on your plate won't actually improve your vision.
File 8A. Pronunciation B. 1,
Reflexologist. Reflexology.
2,
Osteopath. Osteopathy.
3,
Chiropractor. Chiropractic.
4,
Acupuncturist. Acupuncture.
5,
Hypnotherapist. Hypnotherapy.
6,
Homeopath. Homeopathy.
File 8B. Listening. Speaker 1.
I'd been dying to visit such a famous landmark, you know. I've grown up seeing photos of the supposedly huge blast of water that shoots up out of the ground every 10 minutes on the dot. I expected to see this majestic view in a dramatic setting, but I was really disappointed when I got there. It's just located in a kind of sandy lot. The water doesn't go up nearly as high as it looks in the photos. The area around it isn't very pretty, and there were no flowers or gardens or anything.
Speaker 2.
I decided to take my son for his 5th birthday. We were expecting to see a wide range of exotic animals living in a large natural habitat with plenty of room to roam around. Instead, what we mostly found were the same small cages, pens, and enclosures you see everywhere else. While most of the animals looked fairly healthy, they were definitely cramped, especially the larger animals like the polar bears. The whole area was cramped into a tiny corner of Central Park. They really should expand it and give those animals more room.
Speaker 3.
We planned the family day out without realizing that it was going to cost us a fortune if we paid at the door. It would have been much cheaper to book ahead online, but we didn't know that was an option. Not only that, but when we got there, the staff was rude, the lines were a nightmare, and the rides were pretty mediocre if you ask me.
Speaker 4.
I'd wanted to visit since I was a kid. I pictured walking through a garden or something and taking pictures of my favorite actors' names carved in the golden stars along the path. But that's not what it was like at all. The stars are actually located along 15 blocks of a really crowded street. With so many people all over the place, I couldn't even get a picture without someone's legs in it. Not to mention all the street vendors selling junk everywhere. Next time I want to get close to the stars, I'll just Google them.
Speaker 5.
It's called the premier visitor attraction on the island, but nobody tells you that you can't get anywhere near it. You have to leave your car and then go on a mile-long walk along a road and then a crumbling path over the cliffs, which I thought was extremely dangerous. And then you eventually get to a fence where not more than 4 people at a time can stand and get a glimpse. I'd call it a waste of time.
File 8B. Pronunciation B. 1,
Board. Board.
2, plain, plain. 3,
Fair. Fair.
4, allowed, allowed. 5,
Wait. Wait.
6, wood, wood. 7,
Break. Break.
8, waste, waste. 9,
Pier. Pier.
10, peace, peace. 11,
Sweet. Sweet.
12, cereal, cereal. File 9A, listening.
Every year, there are reports of dog bites and attacks by aggressive dogs in the newspaper, which often result in the tragic deaths of children. So what can parents do to avoid this danger? One of the best ways of keeping children safe is to teach them how to deal with an aggressive dog. There are several important things they need to know. First, a child should never ever approach a strange dog without adult supervision, especially when that dog is eating or sleeping. Secondly, they shouldn't run away from an aggressive dog because this often provokes an attack. So does screaming. So children should try to stay calm and tell the dog to sit, stay, or go home. If possible, they should use a commanding voice. This can often snap a dog out of its aggressive mode. Third, a child should never stare at the dog because making eye contact can be interpreted as a challenge. Another thing a child should never do is try and break up a dog fight. In fact, parents need to tell their children not to try to defend their pet if another dog attacks it. Many children have been savagely mauled and bitten because they picked up their own dog when a strange dog became aggressive. Finally, if a dog does begin to attack, children should just curl up into a ball and protect their neck and face with their arms, with their fingers curled up into fists. Staying calm in the face of a dangerous dog situation and knowing how to deal with strange dogs might end up saving your child's life one day. So make sure you give them this information as soon as you think they are old enough to understand it.
File 9A, pronunciation B. 1,
Nest. Shell. Bread. Cruel.
2,
Neigh, tail, calf, cage.
3,
Hunt. Puppy. Grunt. Fur.
4,
Squeak. Pet. Species. Serene.
5,
Tank. Scratch. Whale. Charity.
6,
Roar. Bark. Horn. Sport.
File 9B. Listening. Hello and welcome to today's show. My guest today is restaurant critic James Langdon, who's here to make our mouths water. James recently had lunch in one of the hottest new restaurants in the country, Alma. As I'm sure many of you already know, Alma's a small restaurant on the south side of Los Angeles. It was voted this year's best new restaurant in America by Bon Appetit magazine, which described Alma as an overnight success. James, you eat in some of the best restaurants in the world. What makes Alma so special?
Well, for one thing, it's in a somewhat surprising location, not in a typical upscale district where you'd normally find a fine dining establishment. Until recently, the neighborhood was kind of deserted, and there are still dilapidated old buildings around. But the area is experiencing a revival, especially with Alma's new popularity.
And what's the food like?
The head chef, Ari Taymor, tries to push the boundaries of food and cooking.
Uh-huh.
He's really like an artist, mixing colors together to create a new and unique shade. At first, when you look at the menu, some of the things he pairs together seem ridiculous. Chilled artichoke soup with burnt avocado. Sea urchin and cauliflower. But when you put them together in your mouth, it all comes together almost by magic. I have to say it was one of the best meals I've ever eaten.
Wow, that's generous praise coming from a professional. What exactly did you have?
We'd be here all night if I described all the dishes to you. I ordered a 9-course tasting meal. There were about 42 dishes. They were tiny, but still, there were 42 of them.
42 different dishes? That's incredible. Were they all good?
Overall, there was only one dish I didn't like.
What was it?
It was a plate of tomato and watermelon with black pepper, an interesting twist on a fruit salad. It was presented very beautifully, but both the tomato and the watermelon were too bland. So essentially, the dish just tasted like pepper and water.
Oh, that doesn't sound so good. What was your favorite part of the experience?
Well, surprisingly, my favorite thing about Alma was not necessarily the food.
No?
No, it was learning about their outreach program, the great things the staff does for the community. They support farms and food producers in Southern California by using locally sourced ingredients. And they also work with local schools to present educational programs for children that teach them about food-related topics like gardening, healthy eating, seasonal foods.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you, James, for coming to talk to us.
You're welcome.
File 9B. Pronunciation B.
Boiled. Sliced. Grilled.
Poached. Stirred. Whipped.
Grated. Stuffed. Toasted.
Mashed. Poured. Scrambled.
Heated. Melted. Steamed.
Chopped. Drained. Minced.
Mixed. Peeled. Simmered.
File 10A. Listening.
Do you know anyone who's lived abroad?
Yes, I have some friends, Bob and Sarah, who moved to a little village in Lebanon, up in the northern part of the Kadisha Valley. Apparently, it's very beautiful. They've been there a pretty long time, actually, about 10 or 12 years.
Well, I guess they must really like it there. What do they do?
Well, they bought a pretty big house in the village, and they set up a hiking tour business. You know, people come in small groups and stay with them for a day or two, and then hike to different villages in the valley, staying in small guest houses.
And do they enjoy it?
They seem to be doing very well. It took a while to get the business going. The first 2 or 3 years were kind of a struggle, I think. But now they're established, and they're getting more people signing up for tours. I mean, they don't make a fortune, and they make most of their money in the spring and the summer, and winter can be quiet. But then they do get to live in a beautiful valley in the Lebanese countryside.
And have they gotten to know the locals? I mean, do they feel like they belong now?
Yes, they've really had no problems. Sarah spoke French already, which was obviously a huge help, and they both study Arabic. They tried right from the start to be part of the village, getting to know the local business people and stuff like that. But the real difference was when they had a baby. I think that's when they were really accepted, and people realized that they were there to stay, and the baby was a real star in the village.
So they're planning to stay?
Well, I think so, yes. I mean, they actually expanded their guest house, so they have more rooms, and last year they opened a restaurant. And the first night it opened, they gave everyone a free 4-course dinner, which went over very well. I think they're going to stay. I'm hoping to go visit them and take one of their tours next summer.
File 10A, Pronunciation B. 1,
Foreign.
2,
Calf.
3,
Daughter.
4,
Psychiatrist.
5,
Wrist.
6,
Aisle.
7,
Debt.
8,
Mortgage.
9,
Sword.
10,
Knowledge.
11,
Air.
12.
Postpone.
File 10B, Listening.
Why do you think we are attracted to sports?
One of the things that sports does is it's an extension of what small children all have to do and want to do. They want to learn new skills and be able to do new things. When they can only crawl, they want to walk. When they learn to walk, they start to try to run and climb. Then they want to do things that grown-ups can do, like run fast or throw and catch. They want to wrestle and have force and bodily strength, and these are all things that sports are an extension of. So it seems to me that we should give children opportunities to stretch their physical abilities and build coordination when they're young. Those early stages are really the physical and psychological foundations for doing sports or other enjoyable physical activities like dancing or yoga later in life.
I've heard that it's possible for sports to become an addiction for some people. Is that true?
What I would say about that is that sports can be a passion for some people. That can lead to problems, for example, when it affects relationships or leads the person away from the family. But it works the other way too, especially if everyone pursues their own passions. If family members' different passions can be accommodated and you all come back to the family and you bring some of the joy from what you've experienced, and that actually enhances family.
File 10B, Pronunciation B. 1, Content. 2,
Use.
3. Close. 4.
Tear.
5. Minute. 6.
Wound.